It begins with nihilism, the philosophy that life has no meaning and the world is here for no reason. Do a little dance, make absolutely no love, get incredibly down tonight. Suddenly, existentialism is getting popular. The main idea being, okay, maybe we aren't here for divine reasons, and the world has no absolute purpose, but that's kind of neat because it means you have no shackles, beholden neither to gods nor kings. First and foremost, you're not an employee or a citizen or a digital nomad, but a person. First, you are a person, also meaning that every decision is your own, but also meaning no one is coming to the rescue. And most importantly, no one is really in charge. And it's hard not to sympathize today with that. Have you looked around? Where are the real adults? Billionaires don't seem all that happy, politicians don't seem all that uncorrupted, and personally I won't be taking any life advice from someone who dresses up as a chess piece. The beauty of that anarchy though, one can self-create meaning. Life is not something done to one, but something one does. Albert Camus had other ideas though. A French-Algerian thinker, originally destined to be a footballer until he contracted tuberculosis, Camus agreed with some of existentialism's diagnoses, but disagreed about the medicine. Sure, we're abandoned to freedom, he granted, but so what? The real problem is that we are machines hungry for meaning and purpose, yet destined to look for it in a universe that is nevertheless cruel, unpredictable, and apparently completely apathetic to us. We will be hatched, matched, and dispatched, all the while probably never working out what it was all for. Don't look at me like that, you clicked on this video. Well, Camus reasoned, there are maybe only 3 courses of action available to us in such a ridiculous situation. 1. Refusing to play the game, as in ending one's life. And don't do that, please. 2. A leap of faith, or placing faith in something that there is meaning somewhere. This could be anything from believing in a deity to consulting a sentient melon called Terence before making major life decisions. Or 3. Absurdism, full recognition and acceptance of our absurd situation, of the harshnesses and slights of life, of the fact that we'll probably never attain absolute truth and purpose, and not surrendering to that in a blaze of nihilism, but living in spite of it, a revolt against meaninglessness itself. As Camus put it, the only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion. Because it isn't meaninglessness that hurts, Camus insisted, it's the contradiction of needing meaning and not getting it, particularly our inability to let go of the contradiction itself. For example, ever since my teens, I've been rather terrorized by the question, why is there something rather than nothing? Because what we're really asking, probably, is why is there anything here at all? Meaning, presumably, either the universe had a beginning in time, or it had no beginning in time. Well, alright, let's imagine everything began with the biggest of bangs 14 billion years ago. Fine, but if that was the beginning of time and stuff existing, then there can't have been anything before that by definition. Nothing but nothingness. And how can nothingness create stuff? Even if something exotic preceded the Big Bang, like a quantum fluctuation or whatever. Well, alright, but that's not nothing, that's a different something. And we're back to asking the same question. What came before that? And that? And that? Looking for the first uncaused cause until one's head simply fucking explodes. Okay, maybe creation has been around forever then. The universe had no beginning in time. Well, that solved the whole something from nothing problem. Maybe the Big Bang was the next iteration in a cycle of universes. Expansion, collapse, expansion, collapse. Yeah, okay, but how does that work either? Maybe some weird perversion of general relativity, maybe the universe creates itself from the end of time. But again, shouldn't that have started somewhere, even if the starting point is in our future? How can any system exist without a defined beginning? And yet, if the universe had one, then it must have come from literally nothing. I used to find, if I thought about this for too long, it inspired the same kind of horror as when you realise that third joint was a bad idea. Why do both positions seem reasonable and yet completely contradictory? In academic bollocksy talk, this is called an antinomy. 2 premises that work fine by themselves but won't reconcile. A paradox, in other words. And the beginning of the universe is hardly the only one. Like, is matter infinitely divisible, or is matter finitely divisible? Can you keep blowing particles open until you reach a string or quark or something at the bottom of nature that you can't divide anymore? And if so, why? Or can you just keep peeling the universe open like an onion, divisible all the way down? And if so, why? And for that matter, have all events already happened and we just have to live through them, much like sitting through a film where the real is already there in the projector? Or is the present the only true moment, the past gone, the future not existing yet? In either case, why? Or are all of our choices predetermined by every material state that came before us, giving us no real choice in anything? How to tell the difference? Likewise, one day could we conceivably know everything about how the world world works? And on that day, could we be sure there wasn't something missing? Ignorant of our own ignorance? How would we know? Then there are all the wibbly human paradoxes. Why do terrible things happen to good people and vice versa? Why can't we gain full control of our own minds? Where is the line between the conscious and the subconscious? Are the mechanics of consciousness us as well? Are we all of it, the mechanism and the mind? Because it doesn't feel that way. And finally, if we've been abandoned to total freedom and drift about in the existential ocean captaining a ship of one, with no rules to life but those we give it, how are we supposed to find meaning or belonging or just the bare basics of a reason to live in a universe this unkind and uncaring, where hopelessness seems inevitable, pitted daily against tragedies with no explanation, maladies defying medicine, and let's be honest, other humans who are just straight up cocks? How can anyone live like this, with so much unexplained or random or totally contradictory? Who wouldn't lose their minds? Who wouldn't fall into nihilism? Who wouldn't lose all hope and reason for being? Albert Camus wouldn't. That's where all this is heading, obviously. Another small detour first, though, because I wrote this next bit while I was quite high. Hey, in 1914, Ernest Shackleton and a crew of 27 embarked on an expedition. Their plan? To cross the Antarctic by foot. So, off they sailed south on the South Atlantic Ocean. 4.5 stars on Google reviews for some reason. By early 1915, however, their ship, the Endurance, was trapped in pack ice, inexorably drifting south in it. Soon enough, the ice kindly crushed the Endurance and sank it, and soon enough, there they were, lost on the frozen plains of nothing. And so they wandered, by foot, by lifeboat, for months. They came upon an island, finally, Elephant Island, the first land in 500 days. But so what? They were still marooned and no help was coming. Shackleton and a few others set off to mount a rescue effort, while the rest of the crew stayed behind to try and, well, not die. Shackleton found help 800 miles later, returned to his crew, and everyone got home alive eventually. And even though the expedition was a failure technically, it's remembered today as one of the greatest tales of modern survival. But what's strange is reading about how the crew lived, all those months stuck, intolerably cold, waiting for Shackleton to come back with help, though knowing it was very unlikely he would return. They put on silly plays for each other, made a tradition of moonlight walks, and laughed often. 1,000 miles from anyone, perhaps the most isolated humans in the world at the time, they retained their humanity. As Alfred Lansing writes, in some ways they had come to know themselves better. In this lonely world of ice and emptiness, they had achieved at least a limited kind of contentment. They had been tested and found not wanting. Which is exactly where absurdism begins. Because aren't we on the ice, freezing and isolated? Aren't we tortured by the same questions the stranded crew were? Is rescue coming? Will we make it? What the hell are we even doing here? Aren't we just as marooned, thrown into this era, in these situations, in these bodies, by physics and chaos and biology and history and God knows what else, and expected somehow to live through it? And how do we live through it? Oh, Camus replied, by being very, very French, with passion and freedom and a revolt, with the passion to pursue the joy of being for the sake of it, with the freedom to at any moment choose to continue, to choose to live, to create hope internally, and with the spirit of revolution, a rebellion against the harshness and strangeness of existence itself. Nothing will last, and maybe I'll never understand what the world is here for, what I'm here for, and then I'll live even more intensely. I won't just gaze into the abyss, I'll maintain uncomfortable eye contact with it. I'll go get laser eye surgery so I can stare even harder. You think you're empty abyss? You should see my fucking DMs, mate. What would Camus do? Eat, pray, love? Sure, but equally well, drink, blaspheme, shout profanities at lampposts, take up the mandolin, dye one's dick blue, no idea. But this is the burden of freedom. This is the weight of being. This is absurdism. Perhaps there's a holy watcher in the sky. Perhaps we're an alien experiment. Perhaps it's all just atoms and chance. Who can be sure? Not us. Not yet. But we can dance in the mystery, absurdism says, with the dance as the point all along. Born into an absurd theatrical performance that makes no sense, and rebelling against the lack of sense itself by being better and kinder and weirder. Living inside a paradox and still doing the dishes, knowing we might never know what it was all about, and carrying on anyway. Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is the mastery of fear. It is saying to oneself, wow, that thing really scares me. I guess I'll just go ahead and do it anyway, though. Likewise, absurdism isn't an answer to the mysteries of life, why bad things happen, where the universe came from, or how to survive this shit. It's just asking the question, oh God, what if we never achieve final explanations? What if we never see the big picture? What if we go our whole lives without ever having known what it was all about? And replying to oneself, oh look, it's a puffin. It's a Nice puffin. It's a nice day. Oh, we're alive. That's unprecedentedly weird and cool, whether it's fully explained or not. Let's go for a beer. Sorry, one more thing. Another shameless book plug, huh? I got very bored of writing sci-fi last year, and just at the point I was contemplating throwing myself out the window for something to do, I started messing around with poems instead. It was a lot more fun than sci-fi, and I was quite surprised to find it turned into a book eventually. It's called Poems for the Lost, because I'm lost too, which I think is quite self-explanatory. It's about absurdism, really. And before I changed the subject category, it was also momentarily number 1 in the poetry about death list, which, for reference, you can reach the top of by selling just 2 copies of a book. So thanks to my mother and my mother for that. For once, the digital and print versions are both out at the same time, which is now. I'll leave a link below if you're interested anyway. As is tradition, I'll leave a link below if you're not. If you do end up giving it a read, thank you ever so much. And if you don't, totally understood. We're no longer friends and I despise your very being. Big love as ever. Cheers.